So when you look at, let's take the CEO role. There's always been a very sort of traditional route. You get a, P&L. You run a business unit. I know CFO has been a popular jumping off point. One of the things that's interesting is seeing the many different routes that to the top. Also, the number of people who can skip industries. Give me some sense as to really people who may be watching this who are interested in that job. What advice do you have in terms of the career path since it's not quite as classic as it was 10, 20 years ago?
Well, if you're a gambler, I would I would seek a wide portfolio of functional experience because
Every C suite role that's thrown at you, take it.
right. I'm mostly teasing when I say that. But I would say that experience is table stakes. Um, Having roles that are as much a proxy for the CEO role as you can have is a good idea. Now, what you consider I guess what I would say is then I would think about, so what is the CEO role? And by the way, could it be different from the way my CEO does it today?
Mhm.
Um, and we can get back to that when we talk about the sort of motivation level for the role. But I think an array of functional and geographic experience is a huge help in getting somebody ready to become a CEO. It increases your confidence. You see a company through more lenses. I also think that seeking directorship as a non-executive director on a board, obviously not your own board, is another perspective that you can give yourself to enhance your executive skill set. So I think experientially, the more diverse, the merrier. Having said that, that those paths are paths to becoming a CEO, but they're not necessarily paths to becoming a successful CEO. And in our industry, years ago, we used to say um, the appointment is the end point, but now we say the appointment is the midpoint because it is an ecosystem that gets a CEO from not being a CEO to being a CEO, or from being a CEO of one company to the CEO of another, and seeing it through their lens is the day of the appointment is day one for them. And our firm and other firms and boards, it's really critical for us to not just leave them hanging at that moment of appointment.
So that
Um,
transitional period into office. I mean, when you talk about success, I've been intrigued by seeing this increase in the number of internal promotions. Almost like boards feel like they failed somehow if they go outside the company. That traditionally, if I recall correctly, they have a better batting average than people who are external hires. Those internal hires, is that still the case? And when you think about succeeding in the role, how much of it's contingent on being from the company, from the culture, giving you an edge, or is that no longer the case?
it's a that is a really complicated question with
Probably seven questions in one.
yeah, with a complicated answer. I'll do my best. I think that gauging success today is usually done with old metrics. So I almost can't. I don't know that anyone can answer the question, are internals more successful than externals? One has to be more precise about how they're defining success. If you're talking about increasing the value of the company, or executing or envisioning a strategy, et cetera, it then becomes sort of like too parsed out to really
Right.
answer the question. But that's kind of the point, is that the ways of measuring CEO success are in flux right now, just like the job is in flux right now. So, we'll never know if a big manufacturing company who, did great at increasing the value of the company, but in the meantime was polluting, outrageously, and didn't meet currently undervalued climate metrics. That it becomes that's why I say it's a
Right.
complex question. So I don't really know how to answer the question, that part of your question. However, the part of your question that was about like, are you advantaged if you come from inside the company? I'd say generally the answer to that is yes. However, it also depends. In a major transformation, for an executive to move from C-level position X to the CEO suite, they have to contend with the legacy that they're leaving behind in creating a situation that needs to be transformed.
Right.
So it's a very as we say, it's horses for courses. Every situation is really quite different.
So that in let's me stick with the internal a bit, which is the mindset that you have to succeed in the job to even get the job in the first place. You know, let me start with that because it does pivot to a question about diversity. But first of all, to want the job, but when you look and you do these 360s, what kind of mindset are you looking for that you think that's a person who's going to be able to handle the nature of the job they're going into?
So that's a great question. First, we look at potential, and we have a proprietary way of looking at potential where there are four dimensions, and we can score based on our interpretation of one's potential, but also relative to our database, which, as you know, we're a large global firm, and we do assessments. We do thousands of assessments every year. Um, we also look at their capacities for, as I mentioned earlier, self-awareness, relatability, and adaptability. Um, when you really add all of this up, we're looking for somebody who knows him or herself well, who's had enough of the sort of suitable experience. Doesn't have to be tons of it, but enough of the executive experience one needs to be able to understand a little bit more about what the job is. Um, and we also look for stamina. It's an exhausting
How
job.
do you measure stamina? Ironman competitions.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to measure it. It's through getting to know the person and to understand how exhausted they are to have gotten to where they are. I'm working on a succession right now where, gosh, the candidate is phenomenal. The finalist candidate is phenomenal. It is internal. He knows the company well. The company is super successful, but he is really, really tired. And we're trying to gauge with his input how he can reset and re-energize and position himself for success in the role. And in some cases, that's somatic work. In some cases, it's therapeutic work. Quite honestly, which I'm not qualified for. Neither is our firm, but we can make recommendations. In some cases, it's sleep. In some cases, it's sort of identifying where that individual gets energy. Could be from spending much more time with their family than they have been able to. Could be from traveling for 2 or 3 months because they've been, essentially in lockdown because of COVID. But trying to help them figure out a game plan for re-energizing so that they have the right level of energy for the role.